Hello there and welcome to another one of my videos. Today we're talking about how moral arguments often appear after the interests have already been decided. And I got this inspiration from this book, which is The History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. And it made me realize some stuff, especially the fact that we haven't changed at all, except for the fact that now we have Excel and Bluetooth and a lot cooler weapons to use in the wars. But except for that, it's very much the same. The arguments are the same. The way the politics works is very similar. We really haven't changed that much. And so the idea is that in an ideal world, of course, the political decision making would be done in the order of first doing the moral reflection or the moral reasoning and then action afterwards, or taking a decision. This would be the rational way to do things, and it's what we hope that the politicians would do. But I think we all know that this is not really the case, and it was not the case 2,500 years ago either. So in case you're not aware, this book basically documents the Greek wars, Athens against Sparta. Athens was basically rich and confident, and Sparta was just like Sparta. And they had a war that dragged on for like 30 years. And this, the documentation of this war that was done by Thucydides shows a lot about the human nature, and in my opinion, it showed that we really have always been the same. We were the same back then as we are today. Anyways, like the general takeaway from the war would be that fear and ambition and pride, you know, the classics, basically can destroy the most advanced societies, as happens with all societies maybe. However, the insight that I wanted to talk about is this, the fact that we come up with a moral argument afterwards. And so you notice this when reading the book, that in all of the speeches, or not in all of them, but in many of the speeches, it's as if the decision of what they're going to do has already been decided. And when they come to the debates or when they argue, the only thing left for them to argue about is not to focus on what should be done, but to focus on how do they explain what is about to be done. So the moral reasoning works more as a way to legitimize whatever actions they're taking, instead of actually finding out what actions they should be taking. I think as well, it's very easy to just discard this as, oh yeah, it's a typical hypocrisy and that's it. That the politicians, they're just lying and they're just using the morality as a cover. This is often the case. I'm not saying it's not, but I also think a big part of it is actually, and I think Thucydides might actually agree, a big part of it is that the people using these moral arguments and the politicians using these cover stories and all of these things, they often believe what they're saying. And it would make sense for them to believe what they're saying because like it's almost psychologically necessary for them, or I can imagine it would be psychologically necessary for them. You're making big decisions on behalf of others, and if you're stupid or if you're too dumb to know what is the right thing to do, it's very nice to let yourself be convinced by whatever moral argument is convenient that fits your action that you're about to take. So basically, if you're too dumb to know what's the right thing to do, of course you're going to believe whatever moral argument fits you or that is convenient for what you're trying to do. And so I think a lot of the politicians really do believe what they're saying. I think they did that back then, 2,500 years ago, and I think they do that now as well. It's also not just the politicians. To be honest, I may be being too critical of them, and maybe they're also just trying to do their best, but it's also just part of human nature maybe. Or especially groups of people, once a group commits to something, it's very hard for a group of people to reconsider it. And even individuals, if you're debating or you're discussing something or whatever, it's almost as if people sometimes get trapped in defending things that they might not even want to defend. They just chose, oh, this seems to be the right thing to do or say, and then they can't take it back anymore because their nature just doesn't let them change their opinion or change viewpoint. And then this, together with the fact that almost everyone is extremely good at coming up with excuses or justifying things. So if you combine all of this, of course, the outcome is going to be that we use moral arguments to justify things after the fact. And then, of course, it's almost impossible for a politician not to do it, because the most important thing for a politician is basically to stay guilt-free and preserve your self-image. And that's exactly what you can do with this. Instead of having to say, oh, we're doing this because it benefits investors or whatever, you can argue this is the right thing to do because of these 4 moral arguments. So there's not really that much more that you want as a politician. All you want is to be not guilty and to have preserve your self-image. So of course you're going to be using these strategies. There's a very concrete example in the book that I think is pretty famous as well. It's the Mytilenian debate. Basically, Athens is trying to decide what to do about Mytilene. God, I have no idea how to say the names, because when I read it's just in my head, but now that I have to say it out loud, I actually don't know how to pronounce it. But basically, Athens needs to decide what they're going to do about Mytilene. And they're kind of jumping back and forth and arguing about mercy and justice and things like that. And the first day, if I remember correctly, they basically decide that they're gonna execute all the men and enslave the rest. So pretty hard-handed strategy at first. Then the next day, they come back and they kind of hold a public debate. And even though the debate sounds very, very moral, they're discussing if Athens should be merciful, or would the punishment be just, or what is just and what is right, and what it sounds very moral. But underneath all of this moral language or this jargon that they're using in their debates, all they really want to do is make sure that Athens maintains its power and control, basically. And so what they're really arguing is what will be the most useful thing to do for their own political stability. But it's all disguised in these moral arguments. Everything appears to be about morality, but in reality they're only talking about, will harsh punishment actually deter future rebellions, or will it make allies more desperate and maybe even more rebellious? Things like that. But they're not saying out loud that this is their actual interest most of the time. So the disagreement in the end is not about what they should do. The disagreement in the end is about which moral story best serves that goal. Which story are they going to sell to the masses? And I would argue it's actually kind of fine, or not fine, but to just be straight up about what the goal is or the reason is, and let people think of themselves what would be moral and not moral. But they don't go that route. So they're all using this reframing in order to argue their case. And then in general, if you look at some of the other things that come up in the book, it's not really about clashes of value, but it's more clashes between narratives. The clashes are almost made up. It's like a theater. So the citizens watch this theater happening, where it looks like the values are clashing and things like that. But it's just different narratives explaining different things from different perspectives that is clashing. There's no real substance in the arguments sometimes. The people just don't want to state clearly their agendas, and these clashes are basically, if I can summarize it, would be like this: it's made up moral arguments that try to justify the agendas of people that don't want to actually mention their agendas. That's basically the whole takeaway from the debates and stuff in the book. And so this also, I think, maybe this is a stretch, but this aligns a little bit with the philosophy or the idea that desire actually chooses. Reason doesn't actually choose things, but desire chooses, and then the reason only comes in afterwards to explain the choice to yourself or to others or to whatever. And so the moral reasoning that should be almost proactive or just active in general becomes retroactive. It goes back and reinterprets things of the past, decisions of the past. And all of this, obviously, it doesn't mean that we can't, or that moral arguments are somehow meaningless or things like that. Like, obviously not. Like, this is not at all the idea. But we need to be wary of how they can be used. Basically, we need to be wary, just like we need to be wary about everything. And I think most of us, I mean, this is not a crazy insight or a discovery that I have made, like, not at all. And this was well known 2,500 years ago, and I think it's pretty well known now. We all, I think, intuitively already know that power often governs reason, when we would like reason to actually govern power, but it's the other way around, unfortunately. And unfortunately, what became clear while reading this book is that it's always been like this. It's just the way things have been, and I think it's the way things will probably continue to be. And I think the lesson is obviously not to start being immoral because moral arguments would be pointless. Not at all. I think the takeaway should be that we often discover our principles after we've discovered our interests, and we need to be wary of that. Don't let the principles be discovered afterwards. And Thucydides, the author, would probably also not try to imply that we need to abandon morality or moral arguments or things like that. But we need to acknowledge all of this so that it forces us to be critical. And that's about it. I don't know how to end this well. That's all I really wanted to talk about. The book was really interesting. It's a bit long, but it's very interesting because it's from 2,500 years ago, and people are just normal people. It's all the same. Only difference is the technology. So it was really interesting, and I think I might make another video on this book. That's it for me. Comment whatever you'd like, and I'll see you next time. Bye.